I thought I was ready for a Korean winter. I really did.
Famous last words, right?
Totally. The bedroom we rented, it had these amazing heated floors, ondol, right? It created this cozy little oasis from the world. It was fantastic.
Yeah, that underfloor heating is something else.
But the bathroom, oh man, the bathroom was a different story entirely. The first time I sat on the toilet, the shock of that ice-cold seat was so intense, my entire body just seized up.
Oh, I know that feeling. It wakes you right up.
Wakes you up is an understatement. Huh. It was a cold so sharp, it was genuinely painful. Seriously. Every trip to the bathroom became this strategic, agonizing mission, like, okay, deep breath, go.
A necessary evil of winter living in some places there.
And that cold, it just followed you outside. It wasn't, you know, a romantic, snilly kind of cold like you see in movies. It was hostile, like a physical presence that just dug into your skin until your knuckles were pale and numb.
It gets deep into your bones, that kind of cold.
Yeah. Then, a few days in, something happened that I will absolutely never forget. I was sneezing, just a normal sneeze, and I saw blood. Wow.
My body, totally unprepared for the sheer dryness and the freezing temperatures, was literally starting to bleed from the inside. My nose, anyway.
That's intense. The air gets incredibly dry there.
That's exactly when I realized the phrase surviving a Korean winter isn't just some cute expression. It's a literal reality. And it's one that quietly shapes pretty much everything else in a society that seems built on these extremes you don't always see right away.
That survival aspect, it filters into a lot of things.
Absolutely. So beyond just, surviving the cold, we're going on a deep dive today into South Korea. It's a society shaped by this really unique blend of forces, some visible, some totally invisible.
Right.
We're going to try and pull back the curtain on some of the most fascinating aspects of Korean life. We're talking about the unspoken rules, the ones that govern daily interactions, how people behave in public.
That quiet judgment you sometimes feel. Exactly. And also the ingenious ways they've engineered their cities, their homes, to battle those elements we were just talking about, and even how their beauty standards kind of defy the global stereotypes you hear about.
And a lot deeper than the surface often suggests.
It really is. We're hoping for some surprising facts, maybe a few aha moments for you listening.
Definitely. This is a country that's gone through such a remarkable transformation. I mean, economically, culturally, it's just staggering when you look at the timeline.
Right.
So what we want to uncover today are those underlying currents, the historical resilience, these deeply ingrained societal norms we've touched on, and the incredible adaptations that really define what it means to live and actually thrive in South Korea.
We want to get to the why behind it all.
Exactly. Offer you a fresh perspective, hopefully, on a nation that's often viewed through a pretty narrow, sometimes stereotypical lens.
So settle in. We're about to peel back the layers and discover the subtle, fascinating intricacies of Korean society. Okay, so let's unpack this social dynamic first. I want to start with a story that really, for me, shone a light on this key societal force, this pervasive culture of, quiet judgment. I remember my first week using the Seoul subway. Coming from New York, I'm used to a certain level of noise, of people doing their own thing. I felt like this loud, confident New Yorker sort of drift in the sea of almost complete silence.
It can be quite striking, the difference.
Totally. So I'm on the phone with my mom, deep in conversation, recounting my adventures, and my voice, which seemed totally normal volume to me, was just echoing in this silent car. I didn't even realize it at first.
Lost in the moment.
Completely. But I noticed the silence wasn't just quiet, it felt active, charged somehow. It wasn't until I hung up the phone that the full weight of it just descended. It wasn't anger. Nobody looked angry. It wasn't annoyance, not obviously any.
Nice.
And just 100 pairs of eyes. Looking, the pressure was so dense, it honestly felt like the air itself had solidified around me. Nobody said a word. Nobody even really shifted or sighed. They just looked. And that collective gaze was this silent, incredibly powerful judgment that just screamed, "You are not one of us. You do not understand the rules here."
Wow. That's a visceral description.
Yeah.
And a common feeling for newcomers, I think.
That experience was such a stark realization for me. It immediately highlighted this fundamental aspect of the Korean social fabric, this extreme, almost hypersensitivity to the collective, to the group.
Right.
It was this immediate gut-level understanding that I was an outsider simply for being myself, for being loud in a public space, for not intuitively getting those invisible boundaries. It really left me wondering, how is this profound collective consciousness, this awareness, cultivated and maintained?
Well, what's truly fascinating here, and your story perfectly illustrates it, is how this connects directly to the concept of Nunchi. That's Nunchi.
Nunchi, I've heard that term.
Yeah, it translates roughly to eye sense, or maybe the art of reading the room. But it's so much more than just common courtesy or, basic politeness.
Okay.
It's an intuitive, almost sixth sense, like a visceral understanding of unspoken social cues, expectations, the mood of the group. It's really about subtle behaviors, not explicit, written down rules.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Think about a young person on that same subway. They might instantly stand up for an elderly person even before that person fully steps into the car because they've anticipated the need based on subtle cues. Or picture commuters lining up perfectly, almost instinctively for the bus, without a single announcement or sign telling them exactly how.
Okay, I see. It's like an invisible choreography.
Exactly. And this cultural sensitivity, this nunchi, is deeply, profoundly ingrained in their everyday lives. It influences everything, the nuance in their word choices, the specific pronouns they use depending on who they're talking to, their overall attitude, even tiny gestures.
It sounds incredibly demanding, though, this constant vigilance, this reading the room every second. Is it about following strict rules, or is it more fluid than that?
It's definitely more fluid and subtle than just explicit rules, and that's a really crucial distinction to make. We need to differentiate between simple obedience and this deeper idea of conformity.
Okay, obedience versus conformity. How do they differ in this context?
Well, obedience is about following a clear set of established rules, even if they're strict. Like, say, a child studies for 8 hours straight because their parent explicitly told them to. That's obedience to a direct command.
Got it.
Conformity, though, is different. It's when people are judged, or perhaps judge themselves, based on subtle things, their appearance, their mannerisms, how well they seem to integrate into the collective flow, the group dynamic.
So you could follow all the written rules, but still not conform.
Precisely. Someone might technically do everything by the book, follow all the explicit instructions, but still fail to conform because their actions just feel out of sync with the unspoken rhythm of the group. Or maybe they perform several actions, none of which are inherently wrong or against the rules, but taken together, they're viewed as eccentric or, abnormal. Society pushes for this conformity not through direct orders or signs saying conform now, but more subtly, by maybe shunning someone slightly or viewing them as an anomaly, or simply by making them feel like an outsider, like you did on the subway. That feeling itself acts as this incredibly powerful, indirect social punishment.
That paints a much clearer picture. Wow. And the implications of this pervasive conformity for individual self-expression and even for mental well-being, they must be huge.
It can be, absolutely.
I remember asking myself after that subway incident, what part of my own self, my own personality was being kind of sanded down to fit in? And was that frictionless peace you get on the daily commute actually worth the price of that internal silence? It feels like this immense pressure individuals carry, having to adhere to these unspoken norms literally every second of their lives. It sounds incredibly specific, all-encompassing, and frankly, potentially exhausting.
It can be. There's definitely a weight to it.
How does that constant pressure show up in daily life beyond just, say, being quiet on the subway?
Well, you've hit on a core point. This pressure, while potentially exhausting, is also deeply woven into the fabric of almost all everyday interactions, not just public transit. Think about a business meeting, for instance.
Okay.
Someone with high nunchi, good eye sense, will know almost instinctively when to speak up, when it's better to stay silent, when to offer just a subtle nod of agreement, and crucially, when expressing a dissenting opinion, even if they strongly hold it, would disrupt the group harmony too much.
So they anticipate needs, read moods.
Exactly. And they adjust their behavior constantly. Or in a restaurant, it means knowing without being told to pour a drink for an elder first, or subtly clearing plates to help out. This isn't something explicitly taught in schools through textbooks. It's absorbed from childhood, reinforced constantly through observation and subtle social feedback loops.
It sounds like a constant dance, almost like a performance for the collective good.
That's a great way to put it, a performance. And while, yes, it can come with a personal cost in terms of maybe suppressing pure self-expression, this deep-seated social harmony, this shared understanding, also contributes to a remarkable efficiency in many ways.
Efficiency. That makes sense.
Remember that story you shared about the driver? Arriving literally at 8:59 a.m. for a 9 a.m. pickup and demanding punctuality even from foreigners who might be used to a more relaxed schedule.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting that level of precision.
That's Nunchi in action, predicting the need for punctuality. But it's also a reflection of a broader societal expectation for precision and adherence to implied schedules, not just stated ones. This collective understanding and adherence to these unspoken norms creates this incredibly high-functioning society where things often just work smoothly. Think about traffic flow. Queuing, there's often less friction, less wasted time, because everyone is generally operating on the same unspoken page.
Right. So if we connect this to the bigger picture, it really feels like major institutions must play a powerful role in maintaining and reinforcing this culture of conformity. It can't just be individual interactions.
Oh, absolutely. You're spot on. The corporate structure, especially in the large cables, the school culture from a very young age, even aspects of church life for many, and certainly the mandatory military service for men. These are all key institutions that actively keep this societal expectation alive and reinforce it constantly.
It starts young then.
It starts very young. While parents might be quite lenient and affectionate with very young children, that often shifts pretty dramatically as their kids move up the educational ladder. The pressure for academic achievement, for fitting into the peer group, for not standing out negatively, it all becomes incredibly intense. This reinforces the societal push for adherence, for conformity from a very early age.
And from a broader societal view, this conformity is seen as good.
Generally, yes. From a collective perspective, conforming is widely seen as a positive trait. It simply makes everything easier, smoother for the group. Whether it's a child willingly eating their kimchi without making a fuss, or an adult adhering to the expected norms of family structure and career paths, conforming simplifies daily life and interactions for everyone involved. It reduces conflict and increases predictability.
That's a fascinating perspective. Conformity is a catalyst for ease, for societal smoothness. But what about for outsiders, for foreigners like myself? Are we held to that same intricate standard of Nunchi?
That's where it gets interesting. For foreigners, you're generally not expected to conform in the strictest, most subtle sense of Nunchi, at least not immediately. There's usually a certain grace period, an understanding that you're not fully aware of all the incredibly intricate cues and expectations.
Okay, a bit of leeway.
A bit, yes. However, adapting to the general flow of things is still pretty crucial, especially in social rituals. Think about shared meals, after-work drinking activities, group outings, knowing the basics, when to offer a toast, maybe how to pour a drink for someone senior, when to fill someone else's glass before your own, or even just how to decline something politely without causing awkwardness. These are important for smooth interactions.
I can definitely imagine. So while I might get a pass on the subtle eye sense stuff on the subway initially, if I'm constantly interrupting people in a meeting or totally failing to read the room in a social dinner setting, that grace period probably evaporates pretty quickly.
Precisely. You'll find things go much smoother if you make an effort to observe and adapt to that flow. And the blending challenge, as some call it, for ethnically Asian foreigners can be particularly complex.
How so?
Well, even with an Asian appearance, unless you have a specifically Korean look, you might still stand out. But the real giveaway is often linguistic. The moment you open your mouth and something less than completely fluent, natural-sounding Korean comes out, the game of blending in seamlessly is essentially over. People will likely switch to treating you as a foreigner, albeit perhaps a familiar-looking one.
Right.
It's often said, maybe half-jokingly, maybe not, that it can take about half a decade, maybe even longer, living there to truly snuggle into the culture. And this isn't just about achieving conversational fluency, well, that's huge. It's about acquiring that deep, almost intuitive understanding of generational cultural layers, shared historical experiences, pop culture references, and a lifetime of absorbing Nunchi that truly makes you feel Korean or allows you to be genuinely accepted by locals as a true insider.
That makes sense. It's more than just language.
Much more. And age also plays a profoundly significant role in almost all social interactions. Older individuals generally expect a certain level of respect and deference, regardless of whether it's perceived as earned in a purely Western, individualistic sense. In those situations, going with the flow, showing respect, and generally avoiding direct confrontation or arguments is almost always the preferred path. It will get you a lot farther than trying to aggressively argue a counterpoint or assert an individualistic stance. It really circles back to maintaining harmony and avoiding discord above almost all else.
Wow. That nuanced social environment provides such an incredible contrast to the sheer physicality of the place, especially that Korean winter I described earlier. It's like two different worlds.
It really can feel that way.
Yeah, returning to my personal experience with it, it wasn't just about the air being chilly. It was the intense, pervasive nature of the Korean winter itself. That biting cold combined with the sheer dryness.
The dryness is brutal.
Right. And the wind felt like it was literally gnawing at any exposed skin. And then, like I said, actually sneezing blood because my body just couldn't cope with the extreme conditions. That was a wake-up call.
Definitely highlights the extremity.
And my rented bedroom with its amazing heated floors, it truly was this cozy oasis, this necessary sanctuary from the harshness outside. But then, step into the bathroom, totally different reality, ice cold, genuinely painful. It made every trip this agonizing mission, a real test of endurance.
Great bathroom divide.
Exactly. And my private struggle against that kind of penetrating cold meant layering clothes wasn't just a suggestion, it was an absolute necessity. Padding was a must, because that cold will seep in, it will find its way through your defenses no matter how many sweaters you put on.
You learn quickly what works and what doesn't.
You do, and that phrase, survive in Korean winter, it's no exaggeration. It's a literal physical reality that drives so many behavioral adaptations. You simply cannot physically survive the cold outside for extended periods without proper gear and preparation. It's the kind of cold that slowly digs into your skin until your knuckles are pale, numb, and actually aching. It turns simple outdoor tasks into these major ordeals. It's a powerful environmental force that undeniably shapes how people build, how they move, how they live their lives.
And here's where it gets really interesting from, say, an engineering and cultural perspective. Because this extreme cold has indeed led to some incredibly ingenious architectural adaptations and urban infrastructure strategies that are quite unique to South Korea.
Like the undul heating.
Exactly. The most famous ancient solution, and one that still defines so much of modern Korean living, is undul heating. Historically, the traditional Korean house, the hanok, is recognized worldwide as this excellent ecological architecture model. It was specifically designed to adapt to nature's extremes, keeping warm in those harsh winters and staying cooler in the hot, humid summers.
I've heard of ondol, of course, but how exactly did it work in those older traditional homes? It sounds like it must be more than just, putting a heater under the floor.
Oh, it's far more sophisticated than just sticking an electric heating pad under the rug. The traditional ondol system used this fascinating network of underfloor channels or flues. Picture this. A fire would be lit, usually in an attached kitchen area or sometimes an outside furnace, like a gunji.
Okay.
And the hot smoke and gases from this fire wouldn't just go straight up a chimney like in a Western fireplace. Instead, they would be cleverly drawn horizontally through these intricate, often serpentine pathways called gudol, built directly underneath the main stone floor of the living spaces.
Under the actual floor, wow.
Right under it. These gudol were often constructed from sturdy, heat-retaining stones like biotite, which is a silicate mineral known for its good thermal conductivity. Or they might use special blue stones, or even olivine, in the areas where the fire directly contacted the system to withstand the intense heat.
Okay, so the smoke heats the stones under the floor.
Exactly. And that heat then radiated upwards through the floor, warming the entire room slowly and evenly from the ground up, before the cooled smoke finally exited through a chimney, usually at the opposite end of the house. It was a brilliant, highly efficient, radiant heating system that made the floor itself this warm, comfortable surface for daily life, for sitting, eating, sleeping, everything.
So it's not just the air in the room that's warm, but the very surface you're living on. That must feel incredibly cozy, like walking on a warm blanket all the time.
Exactly. Imagine coming inside from that brutal, bone-chilling Korean cold you described and stepping onto a floor that's radiating gentle warmth. It's a complete game changer for comfort.
No wonder it's still so popular. But you mentioned hammocks weren't perfect.
Right. While the ondol system itself was ingenious, traditional hanok homes, even with ondol, weren't perfect by modern insulation standards. They still struggled with significant heat loss, particularly through less insulated walls, often made of earth or wood, and especially through traditional window fittings made of paper or thin glass. Think of it like having a beautifully designed engine that still leaked a lot of energy through the seams.
Okay, makes sense. So how do modern ondol systems work? Are they still using smoke?
No, modern ondol systems have significantly improved and adapted. They typically use hot water pipes, usually made of durable plastic like PEX, embedded directly into the concrete floor slab. This network of pipes is connected to a central boiler, usually gas-powered, which circulates hot water through them.
Ah, hydronic radiant heating.
Precisely. It's the modern evolution of that ancient principle. These systems are designed for consistent, comfortable warmth. For example, studies show that with heat supplied periodically, maybe every 8 hours depending on the system and settings, they can maintain an average floor surface temperature of around 27.6 degrees Celsius, or about 82 Fahrenheit.
That sounds very comfortable.
It is. And that warm floor then radiates heat upwards, keeping the average room temperature at a comfortable level, say around 19.1 Celsius or 66 Fahrenheit, measured at typical human height, around 0.3 to 0.6 meters from the floor. This ensures thermal comfort for a good 5.5 hours or so after the heating cycle begins, which is obviously a vital feature when outside temperatures plummet well below freezing.
So Ondal has evolved from this traditional brilliant fire and smoke system to a modern, efficient hot water radiant heating system. That's a really clever adaptation of an ancient technology.
It really is a perfect blend of tradition and modernity.
But what about beyond private homes? My experience, as I mentioned, was that Seoul itself felt like it was actively, almost conspiratorially, fighting the cold on a larger scale.
It absolutely does feel that way. Beyond just individual homes, Seoul itself often feels like it's designed as this literal conspiracy of warmth against the biting cold. Those heated subway seats you mentioned, they are genuinely a small but profound miracle on a freezing day.
Oh, definitely.
People absolutely ride an extra 2 stops sometimes just to absorb that radiating warmth from the seat, letting it thaw them out before they have to face the cold again.
I can totally see doing that.
But it's not just the subway seats. Think about the ubiquitous blast of hot air that often greets you when you enter a department store or a large building. It acts like this instant warm hug, a buffer against the outside. Or just the steamy windows of literally thousands of coffee shops, cafes, and restaurants beckoning you in from the biting wind. These aren't accidental features. They're quite intentional public comfort strategies. They create these warm havens throughout the city, little pockets of thermal relief from the pervasive cold outside. Even the public transportation system itself, from the city buses to the intercity trains, is usually impressively heated, ensuring that commutes are at least bearable, even on the absolute coldest days.
Yeah, despite all this pervasive public warmth, this conspiracy of warmth, as you called it, I was always struck by that stark contrast. The bathroom anomaly.
Ah, yes, the cold throne.
Exactly. My experience with the ice-cold bathroom wasn't unique. It seems to be a very common thing. So why? Why is it that public spaces, buses, trains, shops are often meticulously engineered for warmth, but private bathrooms and many apartment hallways are often left unheated, even in relatively new buildings? It just seems counterintuitive.
That's a great observation, and it really highlights this fascinating blend of practicality, historical context, and cultural norms. There isn't one single answer, but several contributing reasons for this bathroom anomaly.
Okay, let's hear them.
Firstly, and perhaps most significantly, cost saving is a major factor. South Korea, as we know, imports almost all of its energy resources: oil, gas, coal. Energy is expensive.
Yeah.
So not heating transient spaces, places where people don't spend a lot of time, like bathrooms and hallways, is a significant energy-saving measure on a national scale. Public bathrooms, too, are generally seen as places for convenience and quick use, so there's less perceived need to make them cozy or invest in heating them thoroughly. Function over comfort in that specific space.
So it's a deliberate energy efficiency choice, driven by resource scarcity, not just an oversight or poor design.
Exactly. It's a conscious calculation in many cases. Secondly, traditional practices definitely play a role here. Historically, as we touched upon, in traditional Hanok homes, toilets were often located in unheated, separate outbuildings. They weren't integrated into the main living space.
Right.
And squat-style toilets were the norm for centuries, which meant there was no cold seat shock to begin with. So the cultural expectation or architectural precedent for a warm, integrated bathroom just wasn't always there in the same way it developed elsewhere.
That makes historical sense.
Thirdly, the way Ondal works is key. As we discussed, Ondal heats by room, radiating from the floor up. It's not typically a central forced air system that heats the entire volume of the house evenly. So the primary focus, logically, is on heating the main living rooms and bedrooms where people spend the vast majority of their time. From both an energy-saving and a practical comfort perspective, heating these primary living spaces makes far more sense than constantly pumping heat into a bathroom that's only used for brief periods throughout the day.
Okay, Ondal's room-specific nature is a big factor. And what about building quality itself? My impression, maybe unfairly, was that things like exposed pipes seemed quite common, suggesting maybe less focus on insulating every nook and cranny.
You're right to pick up on that. Building quality versus cost is indeed another significant factor, especially historically. Many buildings, particularly apartments constructed rapidly during the major post-war economic boom periods, were built as quickly and as efficiently, meaning cheaply, as possible. The priority was housing a rapidly urbanizing population. Necessity and speed often trumped luxury or meticulous insulation in every single corner.
The poly, quickly, culture applied to construction too.
You could say that. And even in newer developments today, budgets are often squeezed. Money might be saved per square meter in what are considered the non-essential parts of the construction, like hallways, utility closets, or sometimes even bathroom insulation or finishing. Exposed pipes are indeed common, especially in older buildings or basements. And in winter, this can absolutely lead to freezing issues if those spaces aren't directly heated or properly insulated. A frozen bathroom pipe is not uncommon. And finally, there's a fascinating cultural element at play, a sort of baseline resilience. Koreans, whose ancestors dealt with much harsher, less insulated living conditions for centuries, arguably have a different cultural baseline for thermal comfort. They tend to find modern practices, even with the occasional unheated bathroom, relatively comfortable compared to their historical context. There's a resilience, maybe even an expectation of enduring a certain level of cold without complaint.
Interesting.
Some older Koreans might even tell you that being moderately cold is actually good for your metabolism or promotes general health and hardiness. This creates a stark contrast with what they might perceive as, frankly, ridiculous amounts of energy being wasted heating every single room, including bathrooms and closets, to high temperatures in some other developed countries. It's just a fundamentally different perspective on what constitutes necessary comfort.
This really raises an important question then. Given their heavy reliance on imported energy in these challenging winters, how does the South Korean government actively promote energy efficiency in its building sector? It sounds like they have a huge vested interest that goes way beyond just individual comfort.
They absolutely do. It's a matter of national security and economic stability for them. Recognizing their vulnerability due to reliance on imported fossil fuels, South Korea set clear national goals way back, focusing on what they neatly term the 3 E's: energy security of supply, economic efficiency, and environmental protection.
The 3 E's. Okay.
Their commitment started surprisingly early. The first mandatory insulation standard for buildings was actually introduced way back in 1977. That's quite forward-thinking. This evolved over time into the much more comprehensive building design criteria for energy saving, or BDCES, established in 2001. This is a mandatory code specifically targeting high energy consumption buildings like large residential complexes, office buildings, and commercial spaces. It was designed with a relatively simple, practical approach to make implementation easier, consciously drawing useful lessons from the building energy codes already established in other developed nations like the US, the UK, and Japan.
So they learned from others but tailored it to their specific context and needs. How do they actually ensure that builders and developers comply with these standards? Regulations are one thing, enforcement is another.
That's always the key challenge, isn't it? To ensure compliance, all new buildings falling under the BDCES are required to submit a detailed energy-saving worksheet as part of the permitting process. This document needs to be formally signed off by the project's architects, mechanical engineers, and electrical engineers, certifying that the design meets all the mandatory energy-saving items set out in the code.
Okay, a formal sign-off process.
Yes, and crucially, it also needs to demonstrate that the design achieves at least 60 points based on a list of recommended energy-saving features, things that go above and beyond the bare minimum. But here's the really clever part, the powerful incentive. Buildings that exceed 70 points on this scale can actually get relaxed zoning restrictions.
Relaxed zoning. What does that mean in practice?
It means they might be allowed to build, say, 2 to 6% higher than the standard height limit for that zone, or add slightly more total floor space than normally permitted. In incredibly high-density, expensive cities like Seoul, where every square meter of land and potential floor space is worth a fortune, this is an incredibly strong financial motivator for developers to invest that bit extra in energy efficiency to get those bonus points.
That is a clever way to incentivize compliance beyond just fines or penalties. But does it actually work in practice? Are buildings truly being built to these higher standards consistently?
Well, that's where reality often bumps up against regulation. Despite these robust regulations and the strong financial incentives, inspections that were conducted between 2003 and 2005 found something quite revealing. About 50% of the new buildings sampled during that period were actually found to have been built out of compliance with certain aspects of the energy code.
Wow, half, even with the incentives.
Yes. It indicates that even with strict codes and attractive benefits, there are ongoing enforcement challenges, maybe loopholes, maybe cutting corners during construction, that the government continues to grapple with and address. It's an ongoing process.
So what are they doing to help improve compliance?
To support architects and engineers in meeting the standards, the Korean Energy Management Corporation, known as KEMCO, provides practical tools. One key example is a web-based Energy Performance Index, or EPI, tool, which helps designers calculate and verify their building's expected energy performance during the design phase. KEMCO also has very detailed procedures for testing and certifying the energy efficiency of various building products themselves, things like insulation materials, high-performance windows, boilers, ventilation equipment, and so on. This helps ensure that the actual components being used in construction meet the required efficiency levels.
And what's on the horizon? Where is their building energy strategy headed?
Looking to the future, the expectation is that South Korea will likely move towards adopting more performance-based building energy codes. This means shifting the focus from just prescribing specific materials or methods like use X inches of insulation to setting overall energy performance targets for the building. Like the building must not use more than Y amount of energy per square meter per year.
More focus on the actual results.
Exactly. They're also expected to continue setting progressively higher insulation standards and efficiency requirements over time to further reduce national energy consumption. And this isn't happening in isolation. Beyond just building efficiency, South Korea has ambitious national targets for increasing renewable energy penetration across the board. They had targets like 3% by 2006 and 5% by 2011, and the goals have only become more ambitious since then.
What kind of initiatives support that?
Concrete initiatives include government support programs for installing photovoltaic or solar panel systems on 100,000 homes. There are also requirements for new public buildings over a certain size, 3,000 square meters, to allocate at least 5% of their total construction costs towards incorporating new and renewable energy facilities, like solar panels or geothermal systems. It's a multi-pronged, holistic approach.
It really sounds like it. Are they looking at city-level strategies too?
Absolutely. On an urban scale, it gets even more fascinating. For example, the city of Seoul is even using advanced deep learning models, artificial intelligence, to evaluate the effectiveness of different strategies for mitigating the urban heat island affect the phenomenon where cities get much hotter than surrounding rural areas, especially in summer.
Using AI for urban planning, that's cool.
Isn't it? Their models have evaluated things like cool roofs painted with reflective materials. They found these can reduce the summer urban heat island effect by a significant 2.5 degrees Celsius. They've also looked at green roofs covered in vegetation, which provide a slightly smaller cooling effect, around 1.8 degrees Celsius reduction.
But do those have downsides in winter?
That's a crucial point they consider. They also acknowledge the potential winter side effects. For instance, those reflective cool roofs, while great in summer, can actually increase the building's heating demand by about 5% in the winter because they reflect away solar heat. Green roofs, on the other hand, have a much smaller negative impact, only increasing heating demand by about 2%, likely due to their insulating properties. This demonstrates a highly nuanced, data-driven, year-round strategy for urban climate resilience, constantly trying to balance competing needs across different seasons.
Okay, let's pivot now to something else that often dominates the global media portrayals of South Korea. This narrative around extreme plastic surgery and supposedly uniform beauty standards.
Ah, yes, the Gangnam look stereotype.
Exactly. Before I even set foot in Seoul, my head was just filled with images from YouTube documentaries and countless articles talking about this phenomenon. I honestly expected to walk into a city populated by, well, almost identical porcelain dolls, all with those super sharp V-line jaws and the wide dew-like eyes you see in the ads.
It's a powerful image that gets projected.
It really is. And for the first few days I was there, that's pretty much all I saw because frankly, that's all I was looking for, you know? You see the ubiquitous plastic surgery ads plastered all over the metro stations. You notice the polished perfection of women strolling through high-end districts like Apgujeong, and it feeds right into that expectation. It was a classic case of initial confirmation bias, seeing exactly what I expected to see.
But reality is usually more nuanced, isn't it?
Totally. What's truly fascinating here is how the actual lived reality you observe when you spend more time just walking around, people watching, often profoundly challenges this simplified global media narrative.
How so? What did you actually observe?
Well, while there certainly is a strong focus on aesthetics, and yes, cosmetic procedures are very common and accessible, the idea that everyone looks the same or appears overdone with surgery just didn't hold up to scrutiny. That's what a lot of the more sensationalist media tends to claim, but it wasn't my experience at all.
Right.
In fact, just like in any major city, you could quite easily spot the conventionally attractive individuals among the regular crowd. People didn't all blend into one mold. And on the streets, most people seemed, well, pretty relatable. Maybe generic isn't the right word, but normal, just on average, consistently better dressed than what I was used to back home.
Better dressed how?
Lots of neutral colors, especially black. Black seemed to be the unofficial uniform. Bright or neon colors were almost unheard of in everyday street fashion. But even within that neutral palette, people were consistently pretty stylish, very put together, even for casual errands, so it's not a city of clones walking around.
But what does define attractiveness then, if it's not necessarily that specific, surgically achieved Gangnam look we're so often shown? What are the subtle markers that might distinguish someone as particularly attractive in the Korean context?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And the answer seems to be far more subtle than just a singular defined face shape or eye type. Based on observations, attractiveness in South Korea often seems indicated by a combination of subtle physical features, yes, but critically, also by the visible evidence of effort and self-care.
Visible evidence of effort. Tell me more about that.
Okay, so for guys, for example, the ones often perceived as conventionally attractive tend to be taller than average, yes, but also noticeably had a great physique, lean, well-built, suggesting discipline, time spent working out, caring for their body. Okay, physical discipline.
And for women, beyond specific features, they often had incredibly silky, glossy, obviously well-maintained hair. And beautiful, meticulous makeup, especially eye makeup, that enhanced their natural features without necessarily looking overly dramatic or artificial.
So grooming and presentation.
Exactly. But the core indicator, the thing that really seems to signify attractiveness across the board, isn't necessarily a specific facial feature or a body type inherited at birth. It's the visible evidence of sustained effort. This is where it gets really interesting and uniquely Korean, perhaps.
How does that effort manifest?
It's multifaceted. It's seen in the immaculately coordinated outfit chosen with care, down to the perfectly matching accessories suggesting careful thought and planning went into their appearance that day.
Okay. It's definitely seen in skin quality. Skin that appears luminous, almost translucent, dewy, which is widely understood to be the undeniable result of a rigorous, often multi-step, sometimes famously 10 steps, daily skincare routine. Koreans tend to view skincare not just as a chore, but as a fundamental discipline, almost an art form, a core act of self-care and self-respect. The dedication to skincare is legendary.
It truly is. It's also seen in the mastery of the no-makeup makeup look, that deceptive simplicity that looks effortless but often took maybe an hour to apply meticulously, achieving a natural, healthy glow that's anything but accidental. Ultimately, it often boils down to this overall healthy glow, a radiance that speaks volumes about discipline, consistent self-care, and a meticulous approach to one's personal presentation.
That completely reframes the entire concept. So the common Western critique about sameness or a manufactured look often completely misses the point. It sounds like it's less about achieving a single uniform appearance and much more about this daily, relentless, and uniquely Korean practice of becoming, a continuous process of cultivating and presenting oneself.
Exactly. You've nailed it. It's a dynamic process, not a static endpoint. It's about the ongoing journey of self-improvement, self-management, and presentation. It's this constant commitment to essentially self-mastery that translates visibly into physical appearance and perceived attractiveness.
Fascinating. Now, let's talk briefly about K-pop. This is another massive global phenomenon that often defines Korea for the outside world. You know, BTS, Blackpink, the Hallyu Wave.
A huge cultural export, no doubt.
Absolutely. And while K-pop is undeniably a massive global success story, significantly boosting South Korea's economy, tourism, and soft power worldwide, I noticed kind of a surprising gap in its perceived importance internally within Korea itself. My observation, maybe limited, was that locals weren't exactly as driven and thrilled with K-pop themselves, at least not in the same all-consuming, obsessive way that many international fans are.
That's a very astute observation, and it really cuts right to the heart of how different industries and career paths are perceived and valued within Korean society. While globally, yes, K-pop is monumental, a huge driver of the Korean wave and tourism, within Korea itself, it's often viewed somewhat differently, perhaps more pragmatically.
How so?
Well, you might occasionally see, say, BTS posters in a music store, or maybe an ad featuring a popular idol like Wonyoung for cosmetics in a shop like Olive Young. You might hear a hit song by New Jeans playing subtly in a market somewhere. But it's certainly not plastered absolutely everywhere, overwhelming daily life in the way an outsider consuming global K-pop media might expect.
Right, so it's not the omnipresent cultural force dominating everything the way it might seem from afar.
Yep. Exactly. Inside Korea, K-pop is primarily seen and respected as a significant part of the entertainment industry. But it's just one industry amongst many other established, powerful industries that exist: manufacturing, technology, finance, etc. It's not necessarily perceived internally as the most popular or, dare I say, the most promising or stable path for long-term success in the same way as some other fields are.
Interesting.
There's a tangible sense, often commented on, that people there are generally quite serious, quite pragmatic about their careers and securing a stable future. And there's a very distinct, almost rigid perceived gap between pursuing careers in art and entertainment versus landing more traditional corporate or professional jobs.
Okay, so if we connect this to the bigger picture again, this perception gap must tie directly into the societal value placed on different career paths, and maybe that intense pressure for conventional success we talked about earlier.
It absolutely does. It's deeply intertwined. Traditional corporate jobs, becoming an office worker, a salaryman, ideally in a major cable conglomerate like Samsung or Hyundai, or pursuing prestigious professions like becoming a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, or a high-ranking civil servant. These are generally taken far more seriously by society at large and are seen as conferring significantly higher, more stable social status.
The safer path.
Exactly, the prestigious safer path. To climb the social ladder in Korea, the primary, widely accepted and heavily emphasized route is squarely focused on education. This means intense studying, fierce competition for top university spots, attending the best possible universities, all with the ultimate goal of securing high-paying, stable, respected jobs. This is the engine behind the phenomena, like students attending hagwons, those private cram schools late into the night, sacrificing sleep and social life. It's that pervasive study culture dominating adolescence and early adulthood for so many. It's an incredibly intense, single-minded focus on that conventional path.
Okay, so what about the creative path then, like becoming a K-pop idol or an actor?
Well, if you choose to work in the creative and entertainment industry, aiming to become an idol, an actor, a musician, even a designer, it requires a completely different but equally, if not arguably more, intense focus and level of all-consuming commitment. This path demands constant, relentless upskilling, the continuous development of your specific craft and experience, building crucial connections and relationships within the industry.
It's not just about raw talent.
Not at all. Raw talent is just the entry ticket. It also includes maintaining incredible physical stamina and appearance through grueling practice schedules, meticulously taking care of your body through specific diets, exercise regimes, sometimes cosmetic treatments. It's about constantly enhancing your public image, your influence, building your portfolio and personal brand in a highly competitive, often cutthroat environment.
Wow, it sounds just as demanding, just in a different way.
It is incredibly demanding. And the key takeaway here, the societal perception, is that there's this strong, almost existential sense that you have to commit entirely to one path or the other, the traditional academic corporate route or the creative entertainment route. There is perceived to be very little room in between, and crucially, it's seen as incredibly difficult, perhaps almost impossible, to successfully pivot from a committed creative career back into a more traditional corporate trajectory later in life if things don't work out. It feels like a very high-stakes, almost irreversible all-or-nothing choice for many young people.
Okay, so moving from those deeply personal observations and insights into daily Korean life, the social pressures, the environment, the culture, let's zoom way out now to the macro story of South Korea, because it truly is this incredible testament to national resilience.
It really is one of the most remarkable economic stories of the 20th century.
Totally. I remember vividly in a macroeconomics course I took reading the statistic that just blew my mind and has stuck with me ever since. Until the 1970s, South Korea's GDP per capita was roughly on par with that of the Philippines.
Right, a country with significantly more natural resources at the time.
Exactly. But by 2014, Korea's GDP had explosively grown to be 5 times larger than the Philippines. And it kept climbing, reaching the 10th largest economy in the world by 2021. I mean, that single statistic encapsulates such an absolutely powerful story of rapid growth, of overcoming seemingly insurmountable odds, and just this relentless national drive.
That statistic is truly mind-boggling, especially when you layer in the historical context, the challenges that forged this remarkable economic strength and resilience.
What kind of challenges are we talking about?
Well, think about it. Just a century ago, Korea was suffering under Japanese colonial rule. Its resources systematically stripped, its culture actively suppressed, its sovereignty effectively annihilated for decades.
It's a brutal period.
Absolutely. Then, barely liberated, the 1950s saw the country utterly devastated by the Korean War, a conflict that leveled major cities, destroyed infrastructure, and tore millions of families apart, leaving the peninsula divided.
From colonization straight into war.
Unimaginable hardship. And it didn't stop there. They also endured the brutal 1997 Asian financial crisis, often called the IMF crisis in Korea, which plunged the nation into deep debt, caused massive layoffs, and triggered widespread economic turmoil. And on their difficult, often fraught path toward stable democracy, they even endured 2 periods of martial law.
It's just relentless adversity.
It is. And what's truly astonishing, what makes this transformation so unique and studied worldwide, is that South Korea has never been able to rely on abundant natural resources like oil or minerals. Instead, it built its entire modern economy, its prosperity, its global influence almost entirely on the foundation of human capital, education, discipline, hard work, and institutional resilience. It's fundamentally a story of sheer national willpower, strategic planning, and adaptation.
So how did they even begin that journey? Starting from the devastation of the Korean War in the 1950s, what were the very earliest steps in this extraordinary economic ascent?
Okay, let's trace this remarkable journey, decade by decade, starting with the post-war Reconstruction period in the 1950s. This era was characterized first and foremost by a heavy, almost total reliance on foreign aid, primarily from the United States and the United Nations.
How much aid are we talking?
Between 1945 and 1960, South Korea received over $2.9 billion in aid. Now, that might not sound like a colossal sum today, but back then it was enormous. To put it in perspective, this foreign aid financed an average of 74.2%, nearly 3/4 of South Korea's total imports from 1953 to 1960. They were incredibly dependent.
Wow.
But what's truly fascinating about Korea's post-war recovery, beyond just the scale of the aid, is the strategic tension that was embedded within it right from the start. There were significant policy conflicts between the Korean government and the aid providers, mainly the U.S.
Conflicts? Over what?
The Korean government, even in its nascent war-torn state, fought tooth and nail for project assistance. They wanted aid money specifically earmarked to build factories, to directly foster manufacturing growth. They had this vision of industrialization from day one.
They wanted to build things, not just receive goods.
Precisely. But the U.S. aid agency, often more concerned about controlling rampant inflation in Korea, frequently prioritized non-project assistance, things like importing basic consumer goods or raw materials to stabilize prices. They even intervened directly in Korea's national budgeting process at times, which was a constant source of friction.
So even from the very beginning, there was this fierce Korean insistence on shaping their own industrial destiny, on building a productive economy, even when it went against the preferences of their major donors. That's a really powerful revelation about their mindset.
Absolutely. This early, fierce insistence on prioritizing industrial growth, even when external advisors perhaps suggested otherwise, reveals this deep-seated national ambition, this long-term vision that arguably defined their entire future trajectory. It wasn't just about passive recovery, it was about active nation building from the ashes.
So what did Reconstruction look like on the ground?
Reconstruction efforts, particularly from 1954 to 1956, focused on importing those essential raw materials and consumer goods, funded by aid, yes, but also, crucially, on rebuilding foundational infrastructure, roads, ports, transportation networks, and establishing key basic industries like cement and fertilizer production, which were vital for both construction and agriculture.
Laying the groundwork.
Exactly. Despite the massive influx of aid, however, inflation remained a persistent, crippling problem throughout the 50s. The money supply, M2, sometimes grew by nearly 80% annually, and the consumer price index often increased by over 45% annually during the mid-1950s. It was incredibly unstable. During this time, Korea pursued a heavily inward-looking industrial policy. They protected their nascent domestic industries with very high tariffs, averaging around 40%, and used quantitative restrictions quotas on imports to shield local producers.
Trying to nurture homegrown industry.
Right. And manufacturing did grow at a relatively rapid clip, about 12.8% annually during this period. However, overall GDP growth was still quite moderate, averaging only 3.9% per year, largely because the agricultural sector, where most people still worked, grew very slowly. It was a tough, foundational, but ultimately unstable decade.
And then came the 1960s. This is when the narrative really starts to shift dramatically, isn't it? The miracle on the Han River starts here.
Yes, the 1960s marked a pivotal turning point. This was the era of outward-oriented development, famously spearheaded by President Park Chung-hee. who came to power via a military coup in 1961. At this point, remember, Korea was truly one of the poorest countries on Earth, with a per capita GNP well under $100. Abject poverty was the norm.
Hard to imagine now.
It is. The Park government made a bold, decisive, and controversial shift towards an unbalanced growth strategy. The priority became rapid industrialization above all else, formalized through the country's first 5-year economic development plan, running from 1962 to 1966. This plan targeted an incredibly ambitious 7.1% average annual growth rate.
Ambitious indeed. Did it work right away?
Not entirely smoothly at first. Initially, their focus remained somewhat on import substitution, trying to produce everything needed domestically. But this strategy quickly led to a severe foreign exchange crisis, as they simply couldn't afford the imports needed for industrial inputs. This coincided with cuts in U.S. aid, forcing a major rethink. It was a real baptism by fire for the new strategy.
So, a setback right after setting such huge targets. How did they pivot from that crisis?
They pivoted decisively and aggressively by embracing exports as the engine of growth. This period saw absolutely phenomenal export expansion. Korean exports grew at an average annual rate of an incredible 40% between 1962 and 1971. 40% a year.
That's staggering growth.
It's almost unbelievable. They joined GATT, the precursor to the WTO, World Trade Organization, in 1967, signaling their full commitment to integrating into the global trading system. This laser focus on export-led growth, selling Korean goods to the world, was truly revolutionary for them at the time and became the fundamental blueprint for their future economic success.
Then came the 1970s. What defined this next decade for the Korean economy? Was it just more export growth?
The 1970s marked another crucial phase shift, a period of deliberate industrial upgrading. Korea started facing new challenges. Globally, there was rising protectionism, particularly against the labor-intensive goods like textiles and footwear that had fueled their initial export boom. Domestically, there were growing security concerns, especially with signs that the U.S. might reduce its military presence in Asia under the Nixon Doctrine.
Security concerns played a role in economic policy.
A huge role. Tensions with North Korea remained high, particularly after an assassination attempt on President Park in 1968. This spurred a powerful national drive for greater self-reliance, both militarily and economically. This led directly to a massive, state-directed push into developing heavy and chemical industries, or HCIs, things like steel, shipbuilding, petrochemicals, electronics, machinery. It was a strategic, ambitious move designed to catch up with North Korea's own industrial development at the time and create a more robust, technologically advanced, and independent national economy.
How did the government support this HCI drive?
The government provided massive support. This included preferential financial treatment, cheap loans directed to HCI sectors, generous tax incentives, streamlining tariffs on necessary imported inputs, while simultaneously tightening non-tariff barriers to protect these nascent heavy industries from foreign competition. The State-Controlled National Investment Fund, or NEF, was created in 1974 specifically to channel preferential credits into these targeted strategic sectors. It was very much state-led industrial policy.
So a heavy government hand-guiding development. Was it only focused on heavy industry? What about agriculture?
That's a great question, because alongside this massive industrial push, there was also a significant parallel focus on agricultural development, specifically achieving food self-sufficiency. A dual price policy was introduced for major grains like rice and barley. Essentially, the government bought these grains from farmers at guaranteed higher than market prices, boosting rural incomes, and then sold them to urban consumers at subsidized lower prices, ensuring affordability.
Interesting. Did it work?
It worked remarkably well. This ingenious policy significantly stimulated agricultural production and dramatically increased farm household incomes, which had lagged behind urban areas. South Korea actually achieved self-sufficiency in rice production by 1976, largely thanks to the widespread adoption of a new high-yielding rice variety called Tongol, which yielded 25–30% more than traditional varieties. This ensured crucial food security for the nation alongside its rapid industrialization.
So they were strategically managing both industry and agriculture simultaneously. What about the 1980s? Did the focus shift again after the big HCI push?
Yes, the 1980s saw another significant shift in direction, moving strongly towards market opening and liberalization. This was largely a direct response to some of the negative side effects that had emerged from the rapid, state-led HCI drive of the 70s.
Side effects like what?
Mainly high inflation, which had been fueled by the easy credit pumped into the HCI sectors, and growing structural imbalances in the economy, with some sectors becoming inefficient due to protection and subsidies. There was also growing pressure, both domestically and internationally, for Korea to open its markets more.
So how did they tackle that?
The government implemented tight fiscal and monetary policies to rein in inflation and stabilize the economy, and it worked. The Consumer Price Index, which had been soaring at 21.4% in 1981, was brought down dramatically to just 3.4% by 1983. That's a huge stabilization success. And for the very first time in South Korea's modern history, the national trade balance actually showed a surplus in 1985. They were exporting more than they were importing.
A major milestone. What about industrial policy? Did they keep directing investment?
Industrial policy was significantly reformed. The government began shifting away from picking specific industries or companies to support, like the HDI drive, towards more functional support, providing incentives for things like research and development, technology adoption, and manpower training that could benefit various sectors across the economy. Financial sector liberalization also cautiously began, starting with the privatization of some major commercial banks in 1981, reducing direct government control over lending.
And opening up to imports.
Yes, a comprehensive import liberalization program was launched in 1984, aiming to lift restrictions on 95% of imported goods by 1988. This was coupled with tariff reforms designed to gradually lower import duties and increase the competitiveness of domestic industries by exposing them to more foreign competition. Foreign investment rules and regulations governing technology imports were also significantly liberalized during this decade, opening the Korean economy much further to global capital, ideas, and influence.
It sounds like a decade of major transition towards a more market-oriented system. And then came the 1990s, a decade that, as you mentioned earlier, culminated in a major crisis, didn't it?
It did indeed. The 1990s brought further globalization, deepening Korea's integration with the world economy. But this was followed by the devastating 1997 financial crisis, which then necessitated significant, often painful, structural reform.
What led up to that crisis?
Well, driven partly by the ongoing democratization process within Korea, which gave rise to demands for less state control, and partly by the prevailing global trends towards liberalization and deregulation, the government continued its efforts to reduce state intervention in the economy. However, this period also saw the large family-controlled conglomerates, the K-balls we mentioned, like Samsung, Hyundai, LG, Daewoo back then, expanding incredibly rapidly, diversifying into all sorts of new, often unrelated businesses.
How did they fund this rapid expansion?
Primarily through aggressive debt financing. They borrowed heavily, often relying on complex systems of cross-debt guarantees among their various subsidiary companies. This meant if one part of the conglomerate got into trouble, it could potentially pull down the whole group. This strategy led to rampant overinvestment in certain sectors and risky levels of over-diversification. A famous, often cited example is Samsung's ambitious, but ultimately ill-fated entry into the highly competitive automobile industry in 1994.
Risky moves fueled by debt. What about the financial system itself? Was it ready for this?
That was the critical weakness. This rapid corporate expansion, fueled by debt, happened alongside a regulatory system that was still relatively weak. Accounting standards weren't always transparent, corporate governance was often opaque, and financial supervision was fragmented and not rigorous enough to monitor the rising risks. Then, when capital market liberalization was pushed forward, quite rapidly influenced partly by a strong political desire for Korea to join the prestigious OECD, the Club of Developed Nations, which it did in 1996, this opening wasn't matched by the development of sufficiently robust regulatory frameworks and risk management practices within the financial sector.
So money flowed in too easily.
Essentially, yes. Korean financial institutions, eager to profit from the booming economy, started relying heavily on cheaper short-term foreign borrowings to fund the cable's expansion and their own lending activities. This significantly increased the country's overall foreign liabilities and made the entire economy dangerously exposed to external financial shocks or shifts in investor sentiment.
And then the perfect storm hit with the Asian financial crisis.
Exactly. When the financial crisis swept through Asia in 1997, starting in Thailand, it hit Korea with brutal force. Foreign investors panicked, pulling their money out, and Korean banks found themselves unable to roll over their short-term foreign debts. The currency plummeted, companies went bankrupt, and the country was forced to accept a massive bailout package from the International Monetary Fund, IMF, which came with stringent conditions for reform.
What were the consequences for ordinary Koreans?
The consequences were severe and deeply felt. Unemployment soared to levels unseen in decades. Nominal wages actually fell for many workers, and income disparity, the gap between rich and poor, increased significantly. Economic growth, which had been so remarkably robust for decades, slowed dramatically in the years following the crisis after 2000. It was a profoundly painful but ultimately transformative moment for the Korean economy. It forced deep structural reforms in the corporate and financial sectors and instilled a new level of fiscal prudence and risk awareness.
It's this incredibly tumultuous yet ultimately resilient history overcoming colonization, war, poverty, financial crisis that is truly reflected in the modern South Korea we see today, isn't it?
Without a doubt. That history is baked into the national psyche.
Yeah, I remember an exchange student from Korea once commenting to me after spending time in Europe that Korean civic consciousness doesn't seem all that different from what I saw in Switzerland. You know, Switzerland, a country renowned for its order, efficiency, and civic responsibility.
That's a fascinating comparison.
It highlights this interesting paradox, I think. While those living within Korea might sometimes feel, as we discuss, suffocated by the intense competition, the social pressures, the relentless drive, seeing Korea from afar, or perhaps reflecting on its journey, reveals this deep, almost fierce sense of collective pride in its achievements, its orderliness, its ability to get things done against all odds.
A pressure cooker that produces diamonds, perhaps?
Maybe that's one way to look at it. But this historical narrative, this story of resilience forged in extreme adversity, makes Korea a truly compelling case study. And for many developing nations around the world, it stands as a powerful, if challenging, potential role model, demonstrating how it's possible to build a robust, globally competitive economy and a highly organized society based primarily on human capital, strategic planning, and national will, even when starting with virtually no natural resources. It's really a testament to what a determined nation can achieve. So as you can see, South Korea is just so much more than the K-pop, kimchi, and plastic surgery headlines often suggest. And it's certainly far more complex than any simple initial perceptions might allow.
Absolutely. It's layers upon layers.
It's a society where this quiet yet incredibly powerful collective consciousness that Nunchi we talked about subtly shapes almost everything, from how people move silently through a crowded subway car to their deepest expressions of beauty, which are maybe less about a specific look and more about that visible effort.
Discipline made visible.
Right. And it's also a place where ancient traditions like the brilliant engineering of Ondol heating combine seamlessly with cutting-edge innovation like using AI to plan greener cities, all in an effort to tackle these extreme environmental challenges like the brutal winters.
We've really tried to explore some of those hidden depths today, those subtle social codes of Nunchi that govern daily interactions, the ingenious engineering behind Ondol, and the broader urban warmth strategies that effectively combat those harsh winters, and hopefully a more nuanced reality of beauty that seems to prioritize visible effort and self-discipline over achieving just one singular manufactured look.
Yeah.
And underpinning all of this is that incredible story of national resilience we just discussed. A nation built fundamentally on the strength of its human capital, its people, and this relentless drive for progress forged through a truly tumultuous, challenging history.
Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into South Korea. We really hope you found some surprising facts along the way, maybe had a few of those aha moments, and gained perhaps a richer, more intricate understanding of this truly fascinating and complex country.